are here at Contact in the Desert with none other than James Keenan. It's my first interview here, so I'm really excited to talk to James of Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog Ranch, out in the Uinta Basin in Utah. And I think we're in for a really great conversation. James, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
I am pretty excited. It's my first Contact in the Desert. Been phenomenal so far. Right. How's it going for you?
Yeah, it's been great. One panel so far, and then my presentation and workshops coming up, and then a final panel on Sunday.
So I just sat in on that panel. Who was it? It was you, Brad Olson, Sarah Gam, and the two doctors.
Murtaughs.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, fascinating. I am big into, and it's taboo history or different archaeology, hidden civilizations, all that. So it was just absolutely fascinating. And somebody with your background, so I believe you graduated anthropology at UC Santa Barbara, right?
Right.
Yeah. So with that kind of discipline built on rigid, academics, what was the exact moment in your field research where the actual data kind of forced you to break out of the mainstream academics?
Well, I think it was always there. I never really fully believed everything that was being taught or told even prior to going to UCSB. And there were a lot of interesting finds, I guess you could say, when I was doing my field archaeology down in Mesoamerica. And that really kind of solidified this lost history, or at least an older history than what we've been taught. And just the fact that there's so much that's out of place. It doesn't just happen in one spot on this planet. It happens in many. But you always seem to get the same answer where it's a one-off. So it's not, a lot of people say, oh, they hide it, or they blame the Smithsonian for everything.
Right.
But that's a misnomer. What it is it gets put away and forgotten about. If they don't understand it or know how to present it in a museum or do research on it, it's just going to be put off because they need to stick to what's getting them the grant funding or what can get them looked at by peer review. And then the Smithsonian, so here's something I really want to clear up with people, is the Smithsonian didn't hide things. My big thing is I follow these people of great stature, their transition throughout the world. People call them the giants, and they say, well, the Smithsonian purposely hid this information and data from them. But it was really the individual that was in charge of the time, the archaeologists and anthropologists, that really didn't care much for what was going on other than artifacts that could be represented in museums. And what happened was they hired local talent, example, Lovelock Cave, the CITD-Ka, the red-headed cannibal giant.
Right.
They said, they were, these were picked up and swept away along with what was in Grand Canyon and hidden and then maybe even dumped in the Atlantic. What they don't get is this local talent. Let's say for Lovelock Cave, they came from the universities in California, and they were misplaced, or they were just put outside and deteriorated within days because they were looking for physical artifacts that could be placed into a museum at the university, was just a part of that 19th and 20th century culture that was occurring here in North America. What was important, what was going to get them noticed.
That's fascinating, because you hear all the time about the Smithsonian, especially. There's this big, giant conspiracy, and in the Smithsonian, they have the Vatican vault, right, everything locked up. And I think what you're saying makes sense. It's probably people know what, like you said, keeps the grants rolling in, and the peer-reviewed papers and the journals, and that's what they're focused on. So anything that upsets that could throw a kink in funding. So I think it's just the way the system was built and where it works. It's not an active. I think if somebody went to them and say, "Hey, I just have this, can't argue with it, solidified, proven theory that we're actually 200,000 years old," or whatever the number is, they would go with it. But it just has to be peer-reviewed, and how you get there is the problem, because I don't think they necessarily want to take a look at anything that is not coming from within that circle of academia.
Right. Well, yeah, if you're an outsider, they don't consider it academic to be reviewed, and then if you introduce anything out of their realm, and even in anthropology or archaeology, you minimize what you are evaluating or what you're looking into. Like I have an interdisciplinary degree, so it was a broad degree, but my focus was supernatural and religious belief systems and Mesoamerican cultures. So they stick to what they know.
Right.
And you have all these boxes, that are being filled by individuals, and they don't know anything outside of the box, what's to the left, to the right, front, behind. So it's just the way the system was set up.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, they're working in their box. So if some internet guy like me or whoever comes over and says, hey, look what I found, you're not even going to get in the door. You're not going to get a phone call taken.
Right.
You're not calling from a Penn State University or whatever university with that kind of background behind you. So like we were saying, you're not even going to get a phone call. You're not going to get in the door to even present your findings. And that's interesting. But we have to get to the Uinta Basin.
Okay. Let's get there.
Yeah. So I would love to get there.
Right.
So you've had boots on the ground at both Blind Frog Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch. So leaving the television cameras behind, does the actual subterranean geology or energy profiles of those two properties, does it feel like two sides of the same coin, or are we dealing with, you think, completely different forces at work?
So personally, I think that whatever this energy is that's there, and I always tell people whether that energy creates what's happening, the phenomena there, or attracts it, I think is the same. However, to whatever avail, whether it's you're bringing in some type of consciousness, or maybe there's a difference in material, be it minerals and metals at one end to the other. Like, example, an asteroid struck in the past, and you're getting that energy, but in different quantities and through different geological and geography locations, different things are occurring. So a lot of people ask me, I hear all these really bad things about Skinwalker Ranch. It's negative. To a degree, yeah. And then Blind Frog Ranch, I hear it's positive. People, go into the pond and they feel good. They feel great. That's true until the nighttime comes, and then you get some strange phenomena occurring also at Blind Frog Ranch. So it's just a mixed hodgepodge, and you can't minimize it to a single phenomenon because there's just too much phenomena occurring, too many multiple cogs to the wheel occurring in the area.
I think you just summed that up perfectly. So if anybody who's watched either show, there's so many different things going on. There's, stories of portals and creatures coming out of portals and predator-like translucent figures in the trees, stuff up in the skies, feeling things, orbs. So it's so many different things going on. Like you said, I think it'd be really hard to classify as so simple, like, it's all good or it's all evil.
Right.
There's a bunch of different things at work. And I think that brings us into our next question. So when you've been to both places, you've been to Skinwalker Ranch lots of times, Blind Frog Ranch lots of times. Have you ever experienced the hitchhiker effect or any negative effects, or has anybody you've worked with?
Yeah, so good question. So I haven't personally experienced the hitchhiker effect. However, apparently I brought it home and my wife experienced it.
Whoa.
So a couple days after coming back from Skinwalker Ranch, she had an episode in bed where apparently I was waking her up and being pretty vicious about it. And she turned over and she got all pissed off at me. And she was like, cut it out. I'm going back to bed. And she realized when she turned over that she could see me through me. So what was shaking her appeared to be me, but it wasn't fully, like it didn't have a full facial effect or whatever feature, and she could see me through it. So then she was horrified to move the rest of the night, and then told me what occurred. So that is, I guess, what would be considered the hitchhiker effect.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, she allows me to tell that story. There's a couple other individuals that have had something occur like that, but I don't want to get into their story without their permission. So I know of 3 occurrences of the hitchhiker effect that have occurred in the recent time period within the last 8 years.
Wow, I can't imagine your wife. I mean, it had to be terrifying, and for you as well, finding out. How long before had you been at one of the ranches? And were you working at Blind Frog or Skinwalker at that time?
So it was 2 days after coming back from Skinwalker Ranch,
okay,
and from Space Wolf Research, which is just the adjacent property on the south end of Skinwalker.
Wow.
So, because remember, the phenomena doesn't stick to borders. It doesn't know where a fence begins and ends. So there's as much of this high strangeness occurring around the ranch and throughout the basin and in the mountains as there are at the ranch.
Yeah, exactly right. I always wanted to, and I'm still going to, maybe this summer, go to that. I think there's a campground.
UFO campground.
Yeah, right off the camp. I'd like to go stick, because like you were just saying, it doesn't respect borders. It doesn't respect fences. If it's at Skinwalker Ranch, same thing's going to be at Blind Frog Ranch. Same thing's going to be at the campground and the surrounding area. Why do you think, why do you think that area has so much stuff going on? What do you think it is about that basin?
So my personal belief or guess would be that maybe it was an ancient asteroid or a meteor or something brought a lot of energy, whether that's a mixture of high content mineral and metals, I'm not sure. And then the Uinta Basin and the mountains are just full of voids, cavern systems, and there's a lot of water passing underneath this area. So I think you're talking about a mix into what's almost, I would consider like a battery, which provides energy, and then whether it creates or attracts, I can't tell you. I don't know the answer. But wow, that's my personal belief as to what's occurring.
Yeah, I don't know anything else, honestly, that would make a whole lot of sense. There's something that happened at that particular piece of ground that is causing all this, because I don't think it's happening anywhere else that I know of, especially on multiple properties, and there's such an array of scary shit, to be honest. It's pretty frightening with what happened to the original owners, with his family was terrorized, wolf creatures coming out that were shot multiple times with no effect, things coming out of portals, and on, the list can go on and on, but it's pretty scary, which leads us to our next question. Do you know of anybody that has been harmed or gotten sick, prolonged health effects from working at any of the adjacent area or the ranches?
Sure. Well, one of the manager of the ranch has publicly come out and said that he's had health issues due to whatever is causing these issues or this phenomena, that he believes it was tied into that, and that was the manager of Skinwalker Ranch. In regards to other individuals, I mean, there's been people that I know or that I work with that have health issues, and they seem to believe that it's possible that a part of that was due to being in the Uinta Basin for too long of a time period. But you also have to remember there's a lot of natural features there. You're under a very large amount of you're above a large amount of hydrocarbons in the area. So there's a lot of gas releasing, and who knows what else is below ancient that we're just not aware of, whether that's natural or other, or from some type of NHI that was here before. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I have heard stories of people having to get MRIs, going all the way back, I think, to 2011 with Kit Green, and
you're talking about my good friend Chris Bartell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Security for the ranch during Bigelow's period.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story he has to tell.
He tells it well, but I think what a lot of people don't capture, and he and I have discussed this, was the fact that if you look at the high strangeness and the phenomena from a scientific standpoint, and a lot of the new physics that have been coming out in the last 3 to 4 years, they've shown that there's at least 5 dimensions, and that they call it the bulk of everything that's in existence is in this 5th dimension. And if we see more than just this energy and matter existing, time would exist with it, but it would just be a single feature. There wouldn't be a timeline. So when you see a dire wolf suddenly in the middle of the ranch and you give chase to it, and then it all of a sudden disappears, or like you had talked about it back in the Sherman period, they fired at a dire wolf that attacked a calf and had minimal effect, but it still had some type of effect on it. And then you discuss energy and matter with time. It's easy to say that maybe that wolf existed there in the past.
Wow.
And we just folded. And if you fold, you're never going to completely be on the same part of the paper, but you're touching. So if the lattices, if we're talking about a transfer of energy, you require 3 physics lattices to propulsion, to keep you from falling off of the plasma jet, and then for vector, which is your direction. They come in contact together. So if Terry Sherman fired his gun in this time period, it would have minimal effect because it's transferring gravity and electromagnetism through a micro hole that the dire wolf is there, but it's in a different time period, and there would be a minimal effect occurring. Or when Chris and Chris gave chase and suddenly that dire wolf exited, maybe it was already doing that, and then suddenly it became aware of them and took off. And it disappeared because whatever caused that fold or that transfer of energy, which probably is gravity. That's why it's the strongest, but it has the weakest force because it's a distance factor. But maybe we don't understand how it's transferring from 3D to 5D, and that's the difference. So I know that's a lot, and he and I have discussed it quite a bit, but it makes a lot of sense in physics and in the way that we're looking at it as lay people, how it's occurring. So the potential and the possibility from a scientific standpoint is 100%, especially with what we know in the last 4 years through physics.
That's fascinating. And I've thought for a while, I think basically what you just described, I think there's a good chance that accounts for the whole cryptid end of the phenomenon.
Very possible.
Because I find it very hard to believe there's giant creatures living in the woods that we haven't discovered. It just doesn't.
We can say it interdimensional.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
they're multi-dimensions.
It has to be. In my mind, there's really no other explanation for it. And it's probably for whatever reason, like you said with the meteor, maybe that basin is at a certain spot, at certain coordinates, where the dimensions are thinnest or something like that. Who the hell knows? Because cryptids are everywhere all over the world.
Sure, or really providing that energy within, the electromagnetic spectrum that's necessary to affect one of the other 4 forces, which
you are so smart. It's unbelievable.
Well, no, I'm not. No, like I said, because a lot of people, they say, oh, these portals. And a few years ago, when somebody would say portal, I think it as a woo-woo subject, but I'm wrong. I'm incorrect because we now understand I think it's called the MSS, that NASA is watching with the satellites above the Earth, where it's a portal. It's these electromagnetic areas and magnetic where the magnetic fields break apart for a moment and then reconnect because they can never be completely broken, and they're causing these plasma events this massive transfer of energy, and it's creating the opportunity of what we would consider a portal. You know, these electron diffusion regions. The electrons are at such a state, the wavelength is bouncing so crazy, causing all this plasma that won't calm down, and it's causing all this energy, and that's where these portals from one space to another, the gravity's then having an effect at that micro level, and that's what we're seeing. And I think other things that are more advanced than we are, NHI potentially knows more on how to use that to what they need to their advantage, or to travel, or to something in that nature.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty good guess that that's how they are traveling here. And maybe not all of them, but I think some of them are coming via that interdimensional aspect, rather. Because when I started getting into this, I believe they were coming from other planets, and it was just ETs who solves faster than light travel. But the more I dive deeper and deeper and deeper into this phenomena, I think that might be the least likely explanation. But to bring it back to Earth, so mainstream scientists, they like to dismiss the giants of the Americas kind of theory. But there's so much indigenous oral history and in records from the 19th century that tell a completely different story. What would you say is the most undeniable piece of either physical or archaeological evidence that you've encountered?
Yeah, so besides the oral traditions, what that does is it tells us where to look. So another great example at Lovelock Cave is the fact that they have found moccasins or sandals that would belong to an individual that has a 19-inch foot, which I think it would be like a size 28 shoe, which is larger than what Shaquille O'Neal by far wears. So you're talking about an individual, you know, that's at least taller than Shaquille O'Neal. So there is this physical evidence that's available. I always tell people the history that we have available is on rocks, because it's the one medium that'll last. You know, they probably used wood as much as we do today, and it just doesn't last in time. It's affected more so than stone. And you see these petroglyphs and pictographs that show these large beings, which have sometimes elongated skulls. They have these large feet, or they're polydactyly. They have something other than 5 fingers and 5 toes, or like 6 fingers on their hands. And they look to be headhunting. So that would fit into all these stories about like the CITD-Ka, these red-headed cannibal giants.
Right.
We know that there were other cultures here that appear to be grouped in with other groups like the Fremont from the past. It's probably a grouping, because we just don't know that they were different than that culture, that were headhunting. And why, we're not sure, but I mean, you can see it. So you have that too. You have these aspects of historical records and then artifacts that are showing the existence of these individuals of great stature. And then what you got to also remember too is I'm not talking about 20 or 30 feet. Homo sapien could never get over 12 feet in height, because, you know, they'd take a step in and just break everything. There's just no way, when you're creating a greater mass, that you can control movement the same way. But you are talking about individuals that were probably 7 to 9 feet tall, that would have obviously been giants to these individuals that were averaging 5'3" to 5'5".
Where would you... Was this taking place in the same area generally, right? It's not far from where Skinwalker Ranch is.
Yeah.
Just over the border in Nevada, I believe, right? Or was it in Utah?
Sure. Well, Lovelock Cave is in northern Nevada, but it was the Paiute. So you get all these stories in the Paiute were in both of current...
Traveling all over those plains.
States, right through the desert southwest.
Right.
You get a bleed over with the Shoshone groups, like the Timpanogos that were in the basin at that time.
That's fascinating. So across the whole West, a big part of the West, at least from Utah to Nevada, and you find all of evidence of this across that whole area. It's not just in one spot. It's not just in Lovelock Cave that you're finding evidence of these giants of the Americas. I think we could do really well if more resources, if mainstream archaeology actually paid attention to this and invested resources into researching it, could have giant breakthroughs in what we know about our history and who was here. Maybe someday we'll get there, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Money always helps.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
Funding is hard. There's a lot, the technology to be able to look into the ground in a non-invasive manner costs money. And, you go into BLM land, they're not going to allow you to dig 1 inch into the ground. So it has to be in this non-invasive way. And even sometimes using that technology requires permits.
Right.
So, and you got to watch the NAGPRA laws and other laws that are built in to protect human remains, which nowadays you're not even allowed to see a photo of human remains from the past. So it's ridiculous. Yeah, you're not. They've put all that away into the back rooms, and unless you are a bona fide archaeologist or anthropologist, have something to do with a university or a museum, you're not going to get to see it.
It's so ridiculous. It's history. That's really frustrating. It's got to be even more frustrating for you with your background. Well, you could probably see it if you wanted to, but anybody should. Like, you shouldn't be gatekeeping this stuff. People have a right, if they're interested in researching this stuff, they should have a right to see the evidence of it or any information.
Well, what comes up, and I understand it, the Native Americans are saying, you're digging up our ancestors.
Well, digging up, I get that.
Right. Or you've violated, if I dug up your grandfather and took photos of his bones and then was showing it around everybody, you'd be pretty pissed.
Right.
But we're talking about generations and generations back into the past, and they probably really had no connection.
Exactly.
Into regards who these people were, and at what point in time, how much time has to pass in order to be able to say, hey, there is no connectivity, so why don't we have that opportunity now to at least, see maybe we have things completely wrong, and that's one of the best ways to be able to change the history that we have. And unfortunately, it's just going in the wrong direction, and it's become harder and harder.
Yeah, doesn't lend any hope, I think, of things changing in the Smithsonian or any of those bigger universities putting their resources behind this stuff. So in the end, it'll be left to people like you and the people that work with you. So let's talk about these ancient mound sites. And so there's ancient mound sites and structures that they align almost flawlessly with some geometry stuff, astronomy. Do you think any of these lost cultures built these mounds to mark like existing energy vortexes on the Earth's grid, or was it just random?
It's a good question. I don't really get the ley lines and things of that nature, and I'm terrible with astronomy. So it's just not my field. However, we keep seeing these ancient cairns and these burial sites being used over and over again, and you kind of have to ask yourself, whether it be a supernatural or a religious belief system like a medicine man cult, or what they believed in at the time religiously, why were they burying instead of cremating? And why were they continuously using these sites for a great period of time that spans many generations? So what was that reason? And it could very well go into something that we consider now paranormal, high strangeness, unexplainable. So it's definitely possible.
Awesome. Thank you, James. And my next question. So do you think when we're talking about these giants and stuff like that, do you think we're talking about an isolated branch of just really tall humans? Or do you think the evidence points to almost a completely separate genetic lineage? Almost like biblical, and the biblical watchers, or maybe extraterrestrial origin. What do you think it is?
Yeah, so I personally believe that we're talking about a much older culture and civilization. When you look at a lot of indigenous people, it says they speak that we're in the fourth or the fifth world. And the first world was giants that were destroyed by jaguars. And you're like, well, what the hell does that mean? And then the second was by wind, the third raining of fire, and the fourth was this great deluge that we're more aware of. So when you go back into the history, individuals seem to get larger in stature, and they appear to have been the original gods to Homo sapien, or to the Neanderthal, the Denisovans, or the hybridization that occurred between Neanderthal, Homo sapien, or Denisovan, Homo sapien. And you look at the history, even if you take the Bible as historical data, we travel back and we're pretty sure nobody doubts. So I don't believe in Anunnaki as other than they were gods that were being worshipped by the Sumerians. But the Nephilim appear to have actually existed. And we know they were of greater stature than what we were. And did they have to breed to survive? More than likely, yes. They were dying out. What do you do? We've seen it with Neanderthal. We saw it with Denisovan. Why not with this group? And those Nephilim then became, and this is the issue that people have, they think it's Anunnaki, with the Anakim, were these people of great stature, the Raphaim, the Amim, and they appear to have started in what I consider ancient Armenia, like Mount Ararat, and I know from Mount Ararat, Noah,
right?
And you got to ask this individual, whether he was named Adam or whoever from even older stories, was he of great stature? To have created these individuals, if we're talking about a lineage. And then I track, and you can see this advancement, at least westward. I haven't tracked it east because it's difficult to deal with China or other Asia nations, but you can see this transfer to the Levant area, then to islands like Malta, Sardinia, the British Islands, and then the Americas as well. So how they moved about, I would say seafaring, but who knows what type of technology they had over an extended period of time. And so I think that origin was the same for them. If you want to call it Nephilim, fine. But then Mesoamerican culture, you have the Uemas, the Starnake, the Site-Ka, the Kinametsen giants, and they all appear to have similarities. It's just a loss of height as time progresses. And then we know that the last of the Site-Ka were seen around Pyramid Lake in northern Nevada, all the way up until about 1865. Wow. So it was a lot closer in time than people believe. Remember even the Spaniards ran into groups walking around that were over 7 feet tall. And I mean, they'd be giants when the Spaniard is 5'5" or 5'6".
Right. And then there was some violence, I believe, that happened, right?
Right.
Between the Spanish and the...
Right. But we lost the records in 1680 when Santa Fe was, burned to the ground in the indigenous uprising. So...
Wow. So for people who don't know, who are the Nephilim, as far as we know?
We know that it was an ancient group of individuals. I personally believe they were here. I don't think they came from elsewhere.
No connection to the Bible, you don't think?
I do believe that I look at it as a historical document that was more than likely older, because we see a lot of similarities between what Samaria wrote and what this Levant area also wrote. So origin is probably the same.
Okay.
And a lot of translations still translates close to this Nephilim. And then we know for sure about the Raphaim through the history. Look at Goliath. He was of Rapha. and we have, I think it's, oh my gosh, 2 Samuel, I think, and it talks about the individual with 24 digits, 6 digits on each hand, right. 6 digits on each foot, 24 in all. So, and think about it too, they would have kept, they were of greater stature than everyone else, so they would have made it as much as they could with each other, so any type of mutation would have stayed within that group.
God, that's fascinating. You could go down a pretty deep rabbit hole.
Well, there's a lot of ways to go.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. So, James, you navigate major networks like Discovery, History Channel, even Gaia. How do you protect like strict data-driven stuff when is there Hollywood people that are demanding stuff? And how do you combat that? Say, we need to stick to what the data says it is.
Sure. So, yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. The way that a contract is written, most of the time I don't have the rights to that, and I'm not at a level where I can control it. And once it's filmed, post-production can do whatever the heck they want with it. So it's unfortunately not always the way I want things to go, and it's always tidbits, or they sensationalize what they believe will push the storyline. So yeah, I always tell people, if you go to my YouTube channel, or you go to my Facebook.
What's your YouTube channel?
It's James Keenan, Giants and Paranormal.
And I'll have that linked in the episode as well.
So you get to see all of the data and the repeatability in some of it, and then you can make a better decision. The good thing about television, though, that is important, is it brings it to a greater general audience, and then they can make their decision, and Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, the owner kept as much as he could to the data being as driven and as original as possible, so you're getting a really good picture from what happens. But again, like you said, they're in it for a business. They're
right.
there to sell commercial time, and it doesn't always get to the audience the way that it was filmed. So it just is the way it is.
So Brandon Fugal, the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, he does say, what you're seeing on the TV is, that's how it happened. We're not sensationalizing anything. And so I guess he actually does try to stick to that as much as he can.
As much as you can, because, production can always try to lead you.
They're doing the editing.
Yeah, or lead you to act in a manner that they want, that they think would be better to tell the story.
Right. Something might have happened. They say, hey, could you act a little more surprised, or
exactly
whatever, just prompts like that.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I guess that's normal. When it's a business. If it wasn't a business, there probably wouldn't be cameras there.
Right.
So let me ask you this, on Skinwalker Ranch, how much of it is a TV show, and how much of it is people actually looking for something strange? Is it real? Let me see.
Yeah, a very, very high percentage, probably higher than any other show. And a lot of people go, oh my God, it's so boring now after 7 seasons, and they keep firing rockets. But these are the same people that want the science. And what is science? It's repeatability. You have to repeat the outcome and then try to figure out what to do in the next experiment to come up with a different final data point. And if you keep repeating it, that's a good thing, because you're showing that no matter how
that's the definition of science.
Exactly, it's ending, and you're getting that repeatable data. So people want it both ways. Do you want to be entertained and excited about it, or do you want the truth? And there has to be kind of a mix of the two, because it's a business, because they're selling commercial time.
Right.
So
that makes all the sense in the world. And just on my Twitter, anytime I post anything about Skinwalker Ranch, there's 1,000 comments on my Twitter. Oh, it's fake, and they're just making a TV show, or it's boring. Look at them be doing the same stuff all the time.
Right.
Like you just said. What do you want them to do? Do you want it to be strictly a made-up TV show, or do you want it to be real?
No, that's yes.
I don't know what that was.
JJ Murtaugh.
Oh, that's it. Okay. All right. So, James, we're live here at Contact in the Desert. If the crowd's walking away, if you could give them one thing you would want them to remember, what would it be?
Yeah. So I think that consciousness plays in more to what we're seeing than what I would have been willing to admit 6 months ago. I used to talk about a lot of stuff as woo-woo. It's too woo-woo for me. I can't, handle this. And I was wrong. I think consciousness or something, I don't think everything exists in our brain, that it's a bunch of, electrical impulses traveling down dendrites and hitting the next set of connections. I think there's something else to it. And I think it leads and directs the rest of how the phenomena is interpreted. And it has a direct play onto the way we see things occurring.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Honest to God, you could have described me. I was the same way. Just until the last year or so, I didn't believe much in the woo or the consciousness aspect. And just honestly, the more you dig into this, the more that's where the evidence takes you. It's the most likely explanation.
Sure.
For the thousands watching who want to dig into your mapping data, grab your books, or just follow anything you have going on, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so to YouTube, James Keenan, Giants and Paranormal, or to my Facebook, and then you can see what I've put or where things may be. And the books are on Amazon. You can get them all.
Awesome. James, thank you for sitting down with us. Beyond Top Secret by UAP Reporting Center. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I've been following your work for quite a while. So it's pretty cool to finally sit down and talk to you. And hopefully one day you'll come back on the show. We can get more in depth when we're not on a time limit. Because I have so many more questions for you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, everybody. That is James Keenan. Follow everything he is doing. He's one of the best in the field. And yeah, absolutely. I think you're just an honest person, which I think is super important in this. So there's a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of grifters out there. James is not one of them. So follow what he's doing. And that's it.